your source for Warhammer Underworlds in under 30 cunning plans. For today, I'm Phil, and with me as always is our lovable co-host, Davey. How you doing, Davey?
I'm good. I'm just hiding out in this gloom hex over here.
Just lurking.
Just lurking, hanging out, making some plans.
Nice.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, if you couldn't tell from our cunning plans and lurking, today we are going to be talking about the Kunnin Crew. And similar to our combo deck episode, we are going to try building a deck live for all of you listeners. Now, obviously, you won't be listening to it live, but we're going to be doing it live. So yeah, it should be fun, should be interesting, and excited to get to it. But before we talk through any of the Kunnin Crew, we should give you a quick update on the context of when we are recording. And today, while we are recording, is the Saturday preview from Warhammer Underworlds, the most recent one, where we got to see Black Powder, the pirate ogre, and all of his little minions.
Yeah.
What did you think about that?
I think they are. I think they heard you on how much you love Dune Claw, how much people went crazy over this freaking crab, because they're like, oh, let's increase the pet quotient. So there's a parrot and a monkey. I say parrot like loosely. It's some weird like predatory Age of Sigmar parrot.
It looks a lot like the vultures that the ogres have in regular Age of Sigmar, but with like a few more feathers, and they're just like, yeah, it's a parrot.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I didn't read it as a parrot until like the blurb said. I was like, oh, it is. Oh, geez. All right.
Yeah.
When you're a parrot that big, everything looks like a cracker. So
yeah. All those puns. I saw a few in the chat while I was watching the preview.
Yeah.
I've seen some takes where it's like, well, it's just Hrothgorn, but with a different sort of like style, and it's like, I don't know if that's really true. Looks like he's gonna function pretty differently.
I mean, could be. I hear people when they say that though, because it's a ogre with some Noblars and animals, and he's got a shooting attack. So I'm interested. I'm confident that they won't just do Hrothgorn over again. So I'm interested to see like how they distinguish him from Hrothgorn.
Yeah.
And also what lessons. It's now been I was gonna say it's been a season without big boys, but that's not true because we had Kanan last season, which I think he's a bully, he's a brute, but he feels like a fairly well implemented big guy. So
yeah, and I don't think he was really the focus of that warband. So then it was like all the resources didn't go into him, and you didn't get the like big boy Voltron feel like we had with a lot of the other big warbands. So yeah, I'm pretty excited for it. Did you take a look at his card from they showed his uninspired side in the preview video?
What? No, I did not see that.
So he's in there. It's pretty nifty. You should go check that out. I don't think we need to give any hot takes here, but for those who maybe missed that his card was previewed, go check it out because he's scary.
My hot take is I didn't realize it was there.
Yeah, I don't think you would have known necessarily without going back and like looking at the video thing that they showed in the article that they posted. So easy to miss.
Okay, well done.
Yeah.
All right.
And with that awesome news out of the way, we've got our normal community shout outs.
One more comment there for a second.
Okay, cool.
I noticed he's not coming out till the new year.
Yep.
So it means we got a couple months, and I'm kind of okay with that. And we'll talk more about that in a second. It's a little disappointing, but there's some silver linings there. But sorry, go back.
No worries. So our normal topics, we've got our community shout outs. So I know you've got something. So what would you like to let people know about?
Yeah, I've been really enjoying. There was some discussion about the Rivals format, and Tabletop Sydney, in their constant flow of content, has been doing a Rivals tournament. So they take the Dire Chasm warbands and basically run a elimination bracket, I believe, with them. and using just the Rivals deck. And I think that's a good season to do it with. I feel like there's not as many outliers. Like when everyone talks about Rivals and has concerns about particular decks, the ones that come up are like I don't know, like Mournflight or Hrothgorn or Grimwatch, and
Right. Lots of the Beastgrave stuff that was a little over strong.
yeah, just had some real powerful in-faction stuff. Um, and so I like what they're doing there. I like that they're showcasing Rivals, and checking that out as a format. So they're as always, like, their cast of characters slash players and production is all top notch. So if you need a fix, it's a place to go.
Cool. Well, definitely we're going to want to go check that out when I've got some time. Then, in our other recurring segment, we got what the heck is going on with you? So, for me, I have been doing a lot of deck building now that we have all the Hero Deep stuff out. Have to still actually go pick up my box because shipping delays and such, but um, pretty excited. Pretty excited to do this build, but I've been looking at Stalkers, trying to figure out what to do, because I feel like hold objective play is probably going to have been nerfed a little bit.
Mm.
But I still think that they need to be holding objectives to be effective. So trying out a few different ideas. Just sort of gonna throw some stuff at the wall here for the first take for Hero Deep and see what sticks.
Cool.
How about you?
I made it out. We had our first Hero Deep night on this past Thursday at our Warhammer store in Fitchburg. We had 7 folks out, 7 different war bands. That was pretty cool.
Very nice.
And actually, we had an 8th, but he had to depart early, so he actually kind of missed everybody. We were so close to having 8, but it was really cool to see. Cool to see the new mechanics. Everyone, we made it. We didn't kick off our league just yet. We decided we'd have 1 week of people kind of warming up to the new rules and getting into it. And I got to say, I really enjoyed it. It felt like really freshened up the game. You know, as you were trying to figure out, like, okay, like I don't know. It felt to me the biggest change I noticed in gameplay was Gloom versus Lethals.
Sure. Yeah.
Instead of, like, deployment was like, oh, right, like I don't have to like panic about which hex is going to end up all the more dangerous because it's right next to a lethal. Deployment is still important, but it was very different as far as that went. And there's a lot of Gloom out there. A lot of cover hexes. Like I some of it was, I don't think any of the war bands. I think the closest thing we had to an objective war band out there was Alex brought his Kagra Ravagers, and so they were having to flip things over so they could desecrate them.
That feels so bad.
He did get them inspired though. So
okay, nice.
Good on him. A little gambit, a little despoil, or whatever the end around action is. So
yeah.
That was cool. But yeah, I liked that. I liked deck building. I drew a 3rd end phase and got to shuffle it back in. It's like, don't worry about
Always
that.
A good feeling.
Yeah, exactly. So it was nice to have that on the very first shuffle. Is be like, oh, there, I threw a 3rd end phase in specifically to like test this out. And it just feels that much less punishing. I like that you can look at those cards a little closer now. So
definitely.
And the only other thing I have to say about that is that a couple of people did play a little Rivals. Skylar was playing against Marty, one of our newer guys who is trying out the Krule Boys. Skylar didn't quite realize that the season 1 and 2 did not have full Rivals decks. So I got there, they were already playing. I was like, oh, well, how did you bulk out the deck to get up to like rivals? And he's like, what are you talking about? It's like, oh, but
Oh,
uh,
okay.
but it was actually also fun to watch him, pulling out. There's these cards that you don't see otherwise, like a momentary boldness, which is have a Skaven can charge if in the power step as long as it's next to two other
You're right.
rats,
Yep.
which is crazy, right? Like
Hmm.
try to think of a card that'll let you charge in the power step these days. Um, so it's just the setup is so hard, but there was all kinds of like terrible ones. He's like, I've got a third end phase here. Oh, it's so bad. It's so bad. Because it was like get one glory if you have 5 fighters on the battlefield. With with Spike Claws Swarm. It's like, oh
Seems
man,
good. I don't see the problem.
yeah. Thanks, season 1.
Hmm.
So anyway, it was a really good time. We had a great turnout. It was really fun to see the new mechanics, and people are pumped. And
Awesome.
the league kicks off next week. I brought Godsworn Hunt out and had a great time. Actually, played against the Ravagers, so we had a little Bladeborn preview. So
Nice.
yeah,
Awesome. Well, without further ado, let's jump into some deck building here.
let's do it.
So we are building a Kunnin deck for the Kunnin crew. So quick rundown, just to give people, if you haven't looked at them closely, just so that you know what we're thinking about while we're building this deck. We've got some common rules for the crew. David, you want to run through a couple common rules that many of these fighters have?
Sure. You can, if you do not have access to the cards yet, if for some reason you haven't, you can check out the preview articles that we've plugged before that are over on some of our friends' blogs.
Mm-hmm.
Path to Glory is a good one to go check out. But they all of them have 3 move to start, slow side. They all start on 1 block, which is not great. But as minions go, again, having spent some time playing Reavers, I'm like, ooh, 1 block, man, nice. Um,
So fancy.
when they inspire, they all get 1 extra movement point, and then the little guys all bump up to 2 dodge. So
Right.
that's extra dice is a big deal in the Gloom meta,
Yeah.
because the more dice you have, the more times that face has the chance to come up. They inspire by 3 or more getting out of action, and or so that's pretty challenging. Like if you're playing the any Stormcast, well, most of the Stormcast warbands, like you get to inspire once they're wiped out. But so that's the hard side. That will rarely happen. But the other side is relatively trivial, and that is to either support or be supported on an attack action. Um, so, and this is not an attack action they have to make. So it's after an
Yeah.
attack action in which this fighter supports or is supported. So somebody else could actually trigger it for you if they kind of come into a crowd. So
Right.
I think the preferred way is to control it yourself, but yeah, and there's no caveats about success or not in that, so that's pretty solid. Notably, 3 out of the 5 have some have more than range 1 on their attack actions.
Mm-hmm.
So not Gicket, but Shank. Shank has a net that he
Mm-hmm.
can throw 3, and then both the big guys have a range 2 with their Grabba or Triprata. So that's notable. And then 3/kind of 4 of them have something that triggers off of support. So both the minions, the little guys, Shank and Gicket, they get to count as double support if they are supporting.
Which is nuts.
Yeah. And also, when this fighter provides support, count him as 2 supporting fighters. That is not specifically on offense, so they can provide it on defense too. So
Yep.
that's pretty cool. I'm be honest, I just noticed that myself. Torka supports from range 2, which is nuts.
Yeah.
I
Crazy.
I think I thought that was good, and then when I was watching it in action, I was like, "Wow, that is a wide radius that he provides that help to." Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that one is offensive only, so it's when another friendly fighter
Yep.
makes an attack action, so can't help on defense. Crook Grin doesn't have anything support. Manok kind of does. He has this reaction where after a friendly fighter moves, so is after a friendly fighter moves, it could be even his own movement. Then he can trigger an adjacent fighter to take a move action. Um, so he can find a way to engineer supports as well through that, or all kinds of other tricks, like send somebody off into an important spot or whatever. He can run up and drag a vulnerable fighter back. He's got a lot of cool things with that, but it's a pseudo support thing. I think
Yeah.
that's the thing that you will probably most frequently see it used for. So, with that rundown, what does that tell us about like what we're thinking going in, having not played these guys, maybe seen them played, done some thinking about them? What do you think of as like their core strategies or things that you're going for here?
Yeah. So because they have so much stuff that triggers off of support, they're rules that just they count for extra supports. They inspire off of supports. Can be supporting from further away than normal. I'm thinking we want to lean into that, and since you're going to be leaning into that, that generally means wanting to bunch up fighters. So, kind of thinking about swarm tactics. They're not a huge fighter warband. I mean, they got 5, so they're bigger than average, but like it's not like they're not like a 7 fighter warband or something crazy. So you are a little bit limited, but I think swarming your opponent's fighters is probably still going to be what you want.
Hmm.
They do, since they do have a lot of reach. I mean, you can take advantage of that and find ways to just make extra attacks.
Hmm.
So I think you want the minions up close, but I think you can leave the bigger guys back and just have them sort of like poke in to attack from like lots of nice angles. It kind of helps with their speed problems too.
Yeah.
Um, and then the one thing from Crookgrin that I thought seemed pretty interesting is that since you are going to be wanting to send the minions in, he does have his money bags action where you can spend a glory to let a friendly minion make an attack with +1 dice. So obviously, if they've already charged or if they're locked down for some other reason, they can still make attacks through this action.
Yeah.
And then when
There's
he's inspired, he gets to make them both do it.
yeah,
Uh,
he could spend up to 2 glory to have both of
yeah.
them make an attack. And like you said, there's no restriction. It can be a range 1, 2, or 3. It doesn't have to be on their fighter card. So if you get a big old
Hmm.
weapon on them, you can do that. So I think it just provides a huge amount of flexibility um,
Yeah.
for those minions. And we've talked about this before with, I think we discussed it with some of these ways to trigger an attack from a fighter that has charged already. It means that the enemy can't ignore that fighter, right? Like you have to be like, oh man,
Right.
like normally I would be happy to just stand next to this guy because it doesn't matter. He's already charged. I can wait before I move away from him, or I can wait till next round to deal with it. Here you gotta be like, well, if they've got unspent glory, like maybe Crookgrin can, uh, make my life miserable for me. So
For sure. I think the only other thing that I noticed is that while they feel like they want to be very aggro and sort of using their like numbers to their advantage, their damage is fairly limited. They
mm,
never go above 2 damage on any fighter base.
hmm
So you do, well, I guess that's not entirely true. Tough Skull has Grievous on his attacks. So on crits, he can go higher. But
yeah.
you don't really
Uh,
want to.
Giket's also got Grievous,
Oh,
both uninspired and inspired. So
right. But he's only base damage 1 anyway.
right, that's
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's sort of one thing to just keep in mind is that if you are building these guys aggro, which I think is the right way to go with them, you are probably going to need some way of boosting damage. Just because the way that Underworlds has gone for the last season and a half is that fighters end up big and bulky and reducing damage. So you don't want to have to hit them 3 or 4 times to take them
Hmm.
down.
Right. So I think what we're seeing then is that we're going to want things that capitalize on the support interactions. With that much support, theoretically, we're doing okay on accuracy. Some of these guys start pretty inaccurate, but with the help of supports, they kind of get up there.
Hmm.
And and we want to try and boost damage on the way in. So I think those are some of the like general things that we're keeping in mind as we launch into this. So
Yeah. So I figure it's always good to start with objectives.
mhm.
So unless you have any disagreements, we can kick things off there.
Yeah, I think so. That we will probably do this in a similar way where we kind of do a little back and forth. You know, if we kind of stall out on objectives, we'll skip forward
Hmm.
like we did and come back around, revisit each category as we kind of give form to some of this deck. So
For sure. So this is probably something we'll want to revisit, but it's also something to just keep in mind from the outset. Now that your objective deck is no longer limited to 12 cards, would we want to go higher than 12 cards?
right, I like that you put this in here. I had not even thought about it, but I think it's a great thing to remind yourself. Like, ask yourself that question. The answer is probably no. I don't want to go more than 12, but ask yourself the question because it's a sort of question you got to keep in mind so you don't overlook things down the line.
Yeah. Yeah. And I tend to agree. I think, and maybe this will be something that we will sort of figure out as we play Hero Deep more. But I'm guessing that with aggro warbands, you often don't necessarily want to go over 12 unless you have a really passive set of surges,
Mm,
just because you're likely triggering a lot of your scoring off of kills, and kills are inherently more risky because you have to roll dice, and dice can always fail you. So the more end phase cards you include, the more chances there are for dead cards.
yeah,
But we'll see. So how about some surges? Uh, some of the first ones that jumped out to me, uh, what are they called? So we've got, I think, one for that's in faction and one that's just for destruction in the Grand Alliance cards. Um,
yeah. This is let's see. I think it's Supreme Kunnin,
yeah.
which
So
is two or more, right?
yep. So you
Uh,
have two or more supporting friendly fighters when you make an attack action.
or the more the meaner is the destruction version.
Yeah, but exactly the same wording.
Yeah. Uh, and it took me a second because I was looking at these like side by side. I was using the physical cards and I was like, what is
Hmm.
going on? Like, did they print the same rules accidentally? I didn't realize I was holding a destruction and I was like, oh, I get it. I finally noticed the more the
Yeah.
meaner the symbol, and also that it had Red Cap and one of the other archers in Prague all kind of ganging up on Oberyn. So I was like, okay, all right, I got it. Um, so I think this is an inclusion, especially with
Yeah.
the little guys being in there. Let me ask you this: what do you think about both? Like, it's rare that you have the opportunity to like literally mirror image, double down on a particular surge. Um,
Yeah.
what are your feelings on doing something like that?
So normally with aggro cards, I would say no, because usually they say when you make a successful attack action or when you kill a fighter with this attack action, score this thing.
Mm,
This one though is just when you make an attack action with double supports, which with
hmm
these guys is literally just make an attack action with one of the minions,
Yeah,
like
as long as
well
one of the
in
minions is
support.
supporting. Yeah.
Uh, and that doesn't feel that hard to me. And so like all of a sudden these are just really simple scores, unless you're
Mm,
getting completely blown out in like round one and you just lose all your fighters. But in that case, I don't think that's a good fail case to build around, because like that would pretty much kill any aggro strategy.
sure. I think they have the potential to be hard to score in the last round
Right.
because an opponent is likely going to try and, if they get the chance, farm the little guys for support. So So I'd say we could throw 2 in for now, and then we'll see what else we got for surges. If
Hmm.
we go above 6 with our surges, we can see if it's one of the ones we want to drop or not.
Sure.
I
Uh,
think another partner for that, in my opinion, would be orchestrated kill.
yep.
Uh, then
Orchestrated
that
kill
is
seems good.
uh, score a kill as long as you have one or more supporting fighters. And if you don't do this during the game, then uh, what are you even doing? Like, you
Yeah.
should probably play a different warband. So
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's their whole shtick. And
yeah.
I mean, there's always the again, like this will probably be harder the later the game goes, but like if you got three surges that are all like do something with supporting
Hmm.
attacks, you're bound to get one of them earlier in the game, right?
Yeah.
Especially
Right.
now that you get the free mulligan.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think this one definitely makes sense. I would say put it in and just uh, unless there's something that seems quite a bit better that we find later on here, that all three are probably going to be in.
Pretty solid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, what do we have anything else supporting wise that you wanted to include?
Not exactly support, but I was thinking about in the same vein of having multiple fighters around enemy fighters is having impending doom.
Mm,
I think there's a number of different ways you could make this happen. Since it does trigger after an activation, and especially with Manok's ability, Cunning Command, if
mm,
you set it up right, you could just make a single charge and then score Cunning or Impending Doom,
yeah.
assuming you don't just kill the fighter. But I mean, that's always a risk with Impending Doom.
Sure. But I think it feels like so. I guess my example, I think the last time you and I played was that totally crazy Blade Coven versus Reavers game,
Yeah.
and I had stolen Matt's deck from Set the Tempo. He had a pre-rotation Blade Coven deck, and had Impending Doom in there. I was like, I don't know about this, but the thing is, like, that the card is better than I realized, because there are times, like at the end of a round, you're like, well, I'll just run someone over here, or I'll sidestep someone over, or like you said, I'm going to charge in. If I don't get the kill, uh, then at least I'll get something, So it,
Yeah.
it can turn some of those, if you can set it up, it can turn those things into a win-win. And like we talked about, these guys have relatively low damage, so um, you could easily have a situation where you set up one of these supports, you score, superior or supreme cunning um, for the attack, and then you score impending doom because you didn't wipe him, you didn't kill him with that, but you're still there. So um, I think the only, yeah, uh, I think it's a solid inclusion. Still maybe to be evaluated, because some of your supporting shenanigans are happening courtesy of Tough Skull,
Hmm.
who isn't actually adjacent. But I think
Yeah.
positioning surges are a nice way to have the option to get glory without having to roll dice. So
Yeah. That was sort of the other thought is like, we should have some stuff in here that is able to be scored without relying on kills or
mm,
successful dice rolling. Um,
yeah.
and that just gives another option.
So on the subject of successful dice rolls, I don't know if you noticed this one. I thought unequal. Well, actually, I'm gonna be honest. The first thing I thought of was a much more like ambitious one. Was Perfect Strike. This is the get a kill, have only successes in your dice roll, and do the exact amount of damage to take somebody out. It's super super greedy. The
Yes.
the better choice is Unequal Contest, which does not require a kill. It just requires all the results to be successes. And I think that's pretty reasonable. I think if we slide in some rerolls in here to shore it up a little bit more,
Yep.
uh, once you're supporting, a lot of the faces of those dice are successes. So um,
Yeah.
I
As
think that makes for a pretty attractive choice.
as many as 5 out of 6 faces on a die can be successes. So
Yeah,
you start to push those odds quite high.
yeah.
I also included that one. I think it is definitely an easy one. I At first I was looking at uh, what's it called? Roll 3 dice with different faces. And then I was just like,
Uh,
why are we doing
Branching
that?
Fate.
Yeah, branching fate. I was like, these guys don't have a lot of 3 dice before they're inspired, and then like that's just harder.
Well, even once they are inspired, there's only two people that have 3 dice, and that's Gikit and Crookgrin.
Right.
So yeah, exactly. I anytime I'm making aggro, I usually slot that in and then notice that it was a bad idea later. So
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
kind of
Some
the same
warbands
way.
love it. This is not one of them.
Here's here's one that have included in some decks and have not had it come up yet. And I keep meaning to just kind of watch the game state to see how often this happens. But from unequal contest, talk about contest of equals.
Hmm.
And this is a score immediately after a failed attack action if the attack roll and the defense roll contain the same number of successes, including critical successes. Here's what I noticed about this is it doesn't say a friendly. It's just any attack action.
Yep. Yeah. So it's just,
So, right. This feels like in the Gloom era, like this is going to happen, right? I don't know.
I feel like it probably happens at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, whether it is reliable, though, I think is a question. I think it's definitely worthy of consideration, though. I mean, if you know you're going to be aggro, you're going to be rolling dice, and there's just going to be those matchups where you're like, all right, I got 2 smash going into this person, and then you roll 2 successes, and they're like, well, I guess I'll just roll 2 dodge out of this.
Yeah.
Um, like it's not. It's probably not something you think about happening all that often, but I think you're right. It probably happens more often than not. Uh, but I guess I'm not even really sure how often it happens. So that's probably one that would be fun to just try out and just see how reliable it ends up being.
Sure. Yeah. I wonder if this is maybe not the best warband for it because you will actually be rolling a fair amount of successes, right? Like if I'm throwing 2 smash with
Yeah.
double supports, I'm probably getting 2 successes and I'll need to crit out of it or something like that. So I think if you're more of a
Right.
uh, couple smash or something, I don't know, but it's let's have that be an edge case maybe.
Yeah. I think your point of the like you can score this off your defense rolls is maybe where you would see this come in more frequently because you are going to inspire to two defense dice on pretty much all your fighters. Um, and in that
Yeah.
situation, maybe it's more likely.
Well, and it's almost well, wouldn't say less about but like when you get attacked and you have like the attack roll coming at you that just had the 1 success, you're starting out on shields.
Hmm.
You may be looking to get yourself into cover hexes. So the 1v1 1 success versus 1 success defenses, I think that might be where you see it the most often.
Right.
So
Yeah.
maybe throw it in there and we'll see where we're at.
Sure.
Um, what other surges are we thinking?
One that I saw in their faction cards I thought might be decent is Malicious Blow. So this is a surge hybrid where you can score this immediately after a friendly fighter's range 1 or 2 attack action if the attack action either takes an enemy fighter with a wounds characteristic of 2 or less out of action. So that's just go pick on a meanie or a
Mhm.
weenie and score this, which that's probably where you're going to score this most often. Or take a vulnerable enemy fighter out of action. I mean, I'm sure it'll happen, but like it's not something you probably work towards. But if you're
Right.
not going to be able to one hit kill things, you might just end up in this state.
Mm.
I don't know how reliable this is, but I thought since it's an in faction and killing 2 wound fighters is becoming a lot simpler because there's just a lot more of them floating around, that it might actually be somewhat reliable.
Yeah, it's hard to wrap your head around because I think some of those vulnerable fighters, like I think you're going to generate them because you will do 2 or 3 damage. And actually, another reason that Perfect Strike was a not great choice is you have a couple guys with Grievous in this warband, and so
Yeah,
can't
accidentally crit
kind
your
of
way
can't
out of
control.
perfect
Yeah,
strike.
exactly. So I think you're gonna because you're having to take more than one attack action and knock somebody down. I think you may end up, but it's tough. Basically against a lot of like 3 wounders. your or even four wounders that you manage to grievous on, you're gonna end up leaving people vulnerable. So it's got potential. I
Yeah.
think I think the partner for this in this discussion is Gristle for the Mill.
Yeah. How about you run that one down for us?
Sure, Surge score immediately after a friendly fighter's range 1 or 2 attack action that takes an enemy fighter with a wounds characteristic of 3 or more out of action. Uh, Everybody's got one of these,
Yep.
right? Like uh, everybody has a fighter that has 3 or more in their warband, and most people have quite a few.
Yeah.
Um, it's hard to think of a warband that you would line up against and be like, ooh, like I'm gonna have a little bit of a tricky time scoring this. I mean, I
Yeah.
guess Blade Coven.
Yeah. Blade Coven would be tough. I think, man, I'm blanking. The Bone Reapers might actually be pretty tough for that too.
Oh yeah, good call. Is it Kenta? Kenta
Kenta's the
and
only one with
yeah,
3, and then you've got your 6 wounder with
yeah,
your big boy. So
yeah.
you got slim pickings there. But I mean, you start getting down to like, okay, we're picking our 6th surge or something. It's
Hmm.
like
Sure.
you start getting into some suboptimal choices, and you just kind of have to play the field a little bit.
So you wouldn't want too many kill surges. We've already got one with orchestrated kill.
Yep.
So let's say if you had to pick Gristle for the Mill, or you had to pick what was the one we were just talking about? Malicious Blow.
Yeah.
Which way are you leaning between those two?
So initially, I was thinking Malicious Blow just because it has that early score potential.
Hmm.
You're going to have your Dangle Bro type fighters hanging out, and you just go pick one of them off and get an extra glory. But there are going to be a handful of warbands that you face off against that just won't have any 2 wound fighters. And then it's
Yeah,
just a really hard score because you have to get them to vulnerable first.
sure.
So I think Gristle for the Mill is probably better if we want to go with either one of those.
I think that's probably true. If you had to pick one or the other, because you get someone like Crushes, and then you're just hoping that it lines up where they'll be vulnerable and you can drop them.
Yep.
I think if it's a warband that has a couple 2 wound fighters, then then the hybrid thing, you probably getting it off the 2, but you may find the opportunity to get it off the vulnerable fighter. So.
Yeah. And I think maybe it's just a meta call. Like, it could
Mm.
really just come down to, like, if you think you're going to be facing down like a ton of Hrothgorn,
Hmm.
you probably don't go for Gristle for the Mill, because then you either have to kill the cat or Hrothgorn.
Yeah,
And that sounds rough to me.
yeah,
But if you know you're going to be going up against a ton of crushes, it's like, well, definitely don't run the other one.
sure.
So, stuff to consider there. Any other surges that you thought of?
I think anytime you're building a deck these days and you're asking about surges, you have to look at everything to prove.
Oh, of course, yes. You have to
Um,
think about it.
yeah. It's a little tough here because everything to prove you have. So, I mean, I think people know what this is. It's if your opponent gets primacy,
Mm-hmm.
or if you have primacy and a quarry. There's not as many quarry cards out there. You do have a couple 2 wounders that people are probably going to one shot, and often they'll be able to one shot Crook Grin,
Yeah.
um, with whoever is doing 3. But it doesn't feel like a given that you're going to be giving up primacy. But it's such a good card with that passive score. So what I would say for now is put it in, find out if we end up with several quarry upgrades. Um,
Yep.
but I guess the flip side is you're not going to get primacy too many times yourself. So anyway, I would start with it in. I think my default is start with it in, and then show me that
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
shouldn't be in there.
I think you're right. I think with 3 fighters that can fairly reliably give it up, and then if your leader dies at any point, you can score this.
Hmm.
And then if there's any other things that trigger primacy, it doesn't have to necessarily be off of kills.
Hmm.
If your opponent is running, any power cards or that give them primacy just for whatever,
Hmm.
you could also just score it that way. So
Sure.
I think you're right. I think for the time being, you just put it in until proven
Yeah.
otherwise. So it's probably just better than anything that requires a kill at the
Mhm.
moment.
The only other surge that I noticed that I thought about was Cruel Tricks. As a
Mm.
surge score immediately if your warband deals precisely 1 damage, and that takes an enemy fighter out of action. On first pass, I was like, oh yeah, with lethals this would do the trick, but it doesn't because it has to be from the warband.
Yeah.
So killing somebody with a lethal won't do the trick here. I think this is I think this is doable, but I think you have to build around it. And I think what we'll find is when we get to gambits, I have a suspicion that like you would just have to lean too hard into this to make it happen.
Yeah.
Add to the fact that you a couple of your well, like if you're trying to do it with Gicket, he may accidentally do 2 damage,
Yeah.
instead of with his Grievous. If you there's like an upgrade that gives Manic a bird that is also a Grievous damager. So I think there's some reliability issues, and I think you just have to commit too much to your deck. That said, I think there probably is a build where you are making up for your damage shortcomings with chip damage of different kinds. But
Yeah.
I think some of those are not as great as they used to be. Lethal Ward is not as good now that a lot of the like people just aren't. You can't like knock somebody onto an objective because you will knock somebody onto Gloom, and if they don't delve, it's not an objective. So
Very
uh,
true.
I think before I even got any further, at first I was going to throw it in and see how it played out. I think I can see the road laid out for before us, and I think that one stays in the deck for now. But
Yeah,
that's not to say that someone out there doesn't have a rad deck that um, does something cool with this.
for sure. Yeah, and I didn't have any others that really jumped out to me either.
Okay,
We've got a lot of stuff right now in the pool that's either hunger triggered or hunter quarry triggered, which we don't
right?
have any of those base.
Yeah.
Like there's just a lot of stuff that you kind of can just set aside immediately and just say like these would only come back in if I go a very specific direction in the power deck, and
Mm,
um, I don't see a lot of reason to necessarily
no,
lean that way.
no.
So I think we've got some pretty solid choices for surges. I've got 8 listed in the deck right now, so we can come back to that and make some additional adjustments after we figure out the power deck a little more.
Okay.
How about some end phase cards? Anything that seemed like a strong choice for you?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple. This is a low scoring, but Born Survivors is a in faction scored in end phase if the number of friendly fighters out of action is equal to or less than the current round number. Um, that feels scoreable. If it's one, you want it to be pretty scoreable round one. Feels pretty reasonable that you could get out of there without losing anybody or with just losing one. That's the round where
Mm-hmm.
people are powering up, unless somebody is like really just sprint at you aggro, um, which honestly you'd probably be okay with too.
Yeah.
That feels like a good one. So I would throw that in there. I think what was the other? There's another one. Outmaneuver I thought was really good for these guys
Yes.
as an
I
in faction.
also had that one. So
Yeah.
this is score this in an end phase if 2 or more friendly fighters each have the same enemy fighter within the range of 1 or more of their attack actions.
Hmm.
And as we mentioned earlier, they do have a number of fighters with reach greater than 1.
Yeah.
And this does not specify that it has to be anything on their printed card. So you could even use upgrades to allow for this.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think this one is just solid. There's no
Yeah.
reason not to be running this.
Yeah, I mean Shank is a big help with this. His range 3, like, is just
Yeah.
gonna blanket a lot of the board, and is like basically is Shank within 3 of anyone else that is in range. I don't know, like that. It seems solid. It seems like it's not a crazy card because there's only one glory, but
Right.
um,
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's kind of where we are with a lot of these. It's like, they're one glory end phase, which is maybe not amazing,
mhm,
but it's reliable.
mhm. Another in that category was showy tactics for me. Uh,
Yes.
2 or more friendly fighters inspired. I can 100% see doing this. Like if you have your last activation around one, uh, flying in, making an attack, 2 guys are inspired. Good, job's done.
Yep.
So
Yeah. I think this is pretty easy. Their inspire condition is very simple. Um, So yeah, I had this one as well. I think it's also in that very reliable category.
Hmm.
Um, uh, One that is similar to some of these ones that we've been talking about in the universals is Looming Threat. It's a little harder,
Mm,
but it is something we're already trying to do, and it's score this in an end phase if two or more friendly fighters are adjacent to the same enemy fighter.
mm,
So obviously slightly harder because you do have to actually have them end next to the same fighter, but I think that there's ways you can kind of make this happen at the end of a phase with power cards if you need to, or if they have a fighter who's charged out already and you can just surround them.
mm.
I don't see this being super difficult, and you do want to be swarming enemy fighters anyway.
Yeah. Um, I really liked Kunnin Warfare, and I liked it
Yeah.
okay when I was building. I liked it a lot after I played some Harrow Deep. Uh, this is two or more friendly fighters are each on a feature hex or on a featured token or in a cover hex, which means that there's a lot of spots they can be standing on the board to get this, and they both have to have a charge token. I think we're going to have plenty of pushes in this deck to try and set up some things so you can make this happen.
Yep.
You can use Manic. This is a good way for him to do it. Like if you're just a little bit out of position, he can charge to a spot. Um, he can charge onto a Gloom, charge next to somebody on his team that's not in one, and tell them to go run off into a Gloom hex somewhere. If they've already charged, right?
Yeah.
He can use that to reposition just to be able to score this. What I like is that this is a aggro card. We've already identified we're an aggro warband because you're gonna have to charge to do this, but it's not an aggro card that needs any dice rolls to have succeeded. It's a positioning aggro card, and that's always super fun.
Yes,
Um,
indeed.
so this is a solid one in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely had it in there as well. Another one more that is sort of this positioning sort of aggro stuff. I threw in Unafraid just for another two glory end phase. I think it kind of makes sense if we're already doing all this other stuff. The only
Mm,
caveat being that it is all of your surviving fighters have to be within two hexes of one or more enemy fighters.
yeah.
And since you do have five, that does basically mean that there's going to be situations where you're just stretched out too much and you don't have enough actions to get everybody into range. Manok helps,
Hmm.
but I have found from playing this card in other five fighter warbands that sometimes you just have one guy who's just out of range.
Really messing it up for you.
But I think, as we mentioned, there's a lot of low scoring stuff in this deck already, and just
Mm,
having another two glory score for basically the same game plan felt like a good reason to include it to me.
hmm. Um, I think that was one that I would keep an eye on and see if it's
Yeah, I
something
think
we'd
I think
cut
it
out
need
later.
enough pushes and stuff to make it work.
Yeah. Talking about a two glory, and this is maybe a little more controversial, but what we've got right now is a lot of lower glory but reliable ones. So
Yep.
there's two cards that I was looking at that might kind of play off of that, and one is
I think I know maybe what direction you're going, but I can't quite tell yet because you haven't said anything.
yeah, Mind
the
of Mork.
Yeah, the
I was,
infaction one.
I was
Yep.
looking at Mind of Mork, and this is a dual score in an end phase if there is a surviving friendly leader and you have scored two or more other objective cards in this round. Um,
Hmm.
it's only one, so I don't know if that payoff is good enough. And I think Manic's relatively tough, but it's a little challenging. Kind of a bigger swing, a bigger partner to that is a universal called Proud Commander.
Yep, that was the other one
Uh,
I was thinking you were probably going to say.
yeah, all right. And this is seven or more objective cards have been scored, or your leaders in enemy territory. Um, and it feels I kind of like this one. I like it because we're in this set of rules now where you can mulligan this and see it later. You don't have to.
Yeah.
Normally, a two glory third end phase is not so great, but you don't have to have this in your opening hand. Um, and I think that the games where you're going to get stalled out, where you're not going to have seven objectives scored, are going to be ones that are like against a control player, somebody who's not engaging, right? Like,
Hmm.
because a lot of yours are aggro, easy aggro, relatively easy aggro ones. And that's the kind of game where Manic will almost certainly be alive at the end. and can just walk into enemy territory and score this for you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's infinitely easier than scoring. What's it called? The old school, just to have everybody in enemy territory.
Conquest.
Conquest. Yeah. I mean, it's the same amount of glory, but you just have to have your leader. So
Mm.
yeah, I definitely think that's a solid choice. I don't. I mean, like all the reasons you said, there's always those fail factors for these, but you got to have some higher scoring cards, because if you just go like all one glory cards, you're just sometimes just gonna get beat because of the math.
Yeah, you just couldn't
Um,
catch up.
so I definitely think that makes sense with a lot of the other stuff that we're running already. Uh, let's see.
How many end phase do we have in there now?
So we now have, I believe, so I had a couple others in here already that I think we haven't touched on. So if I take those out,
Oh, what do you have in there?
well, so I included tougher than use. So this is another hybrid one. So friendly fighters have more wound counters than enemy fighters,
Hmm.
which, I mean, that's probably not going to come up very much. Or one or more surviving friendly fighters each have more upgrades than each enemy fighter. And so it's sort of like, unless you're facing off against the big Voltron builds, that's probably
Hmm.
where you can go with Manok, because he does have 5 wounds and you can probably stack stuff on him to get him pretty big.
Mm.
It's not super reliable. It's definitely like one of the later choices that I put in here. We can
Yeah.
probably just cut it.
Okay.
I think a lot of the other things seem better.
The one thing I was going to ask about that with when do illusions get dropped? Because
Uh,
the end of the action
in the
phase.
action
So
phase, yeah.
yeah, so illusions will drop off. These guys have a few decent illusion upgrades, but they won't help out here. So
They
I think that kind of
do.
works against this card.
Yes. I had not initially included any illusions. I'll be interested to see which ones you wanted to include.
Oh, all right, all right.
Let's see other things that I had in here. I think the only other one that I had put in because we're aggro and because I really think that this is a good third end phase aggro is Demolish the Opposition.
Mm.
And probably not for the second condition, because there's no more than one surviving enemy fighter is always tough.
Yeah,
But if you're aggro into aggro matchup or aggro into like a positioning warband where they're just going to need to be moving towards you, uh, or just get forced out of their own territory for defensive reasons, the score this in third end phase, if there are no enemy fighters in enemy territory, is sometimes just surprisingly easy to accomplish,
mm.
for a third end phase for 3. I don't
Sure.
think it's a slam dunk. I don't think you just guaranteed put this in like you would if you're playing like Mollog or something, but I do still think it's worthy of consideration.
Yeah, I think it looks. I think it's worth thinking about, and I think obviously we'd be doing that or Proud Commander.
Yep.
So
And I think,
let's see what else we build and
yeah.
see where we're at.
So if we stick with Proud Commander, then we have 8 end phase total, including the 1/3 end phase.
Okay.
So we would have a couple cuts to make on both sides, but I think that that's pretty normal. You usually
Yep.
end up there.
Yep.
And I think all of them sort of work together. So any mix of what we've already chosen probably gets us where we want to be.
Okay.
So going on to gambits.
Yeah, sounds good.
Some of the first ones that I included were things like countercharge, which allows you to make a reaction after an enemy fighter's move action, as a charge. So when an enemy charges, and then you get to push a friendly fighter up to 3 hexes, and they have to end adjacent to the charging fighter. Reason for doing this is because you get the supports. You can get double supports if you've got the minions doing this, or if they're the ones getting charged, you pull somebody else in, and then they get an extra supporting fighter, and then you can trigger the inspire for multiple fighters, because
Yeah.
they will all be in support.
Yeah. I the only thing better is if they still had blindside available.
Oh man, yeah. I was looking for it and then was like, oh, it's gone.
Yeah, I think that's strong, and I will be honest, I didn't include it, and that's because I personally had overlooked the fact that both the minions ability, the pain in the knee ability, and the inspire happened on defensive supports as well. So um,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah.
I think another obvious choice would be Strength of the Swarm. This
Yep.
is out of the Silent Menace, and this is +1 dice if there's a single supporting fighter, and +1 damage as well if there is two supporting fighters. So now your minions come running in and give you double supports and +1 dice and +1 damage. Like, whew.
Yeah. Almost a guaranteed
Yeah.
attack there.
If
And
I ever doubted that this was good, my games uh, against the Bone Boys, the
yeah, the
Ossiarch,
Reapers.
yeah, Canaan's Reapers have shown me that this is a horrifying card when used with a warband that can really leverage it.
Yeah. I mean, it is a huge swing in both lethality and accuracy. So it was one of the first inclusions that I put in. I think there's lots of uses for it. Um, and I mean, well, people probably are familiar with this card at this point. I think it bears mentioning that it's not a in the next activation power step card. It's just a this effect persists until after the next attack action made by a friendly fighter. So if for some
Mm,
reason you get into a situation where you're like, oh, they played, inured to pain or whatever, and I
yeah,
just can't hurt them this turn, you just hold off. You just don't waste it, which I think makes it even better. So,
right.
really cool card. I definitely think it's really strong with this warband.
Yeah, I would agree.
Another one that makes a lot of sense for this warband, I think, is Center of Attention.
Hmm.
um, I mean, it's just a staple at this point. I think, given the pushes that are available in the current card pool, there's tons of stuff that you can do with Center of Attention, both offensively and defensively. And I probably will never leave home without it until something better comes out.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. I think that's a good pickup. I think that I knowing how scant your gambit slots get, I had other disruption cards like Hypnotic Buzz. I think you let Center of Attention be your sort of distraction for when you really need it.
Yeah.
I think Hypnotic Buzz is probably going to get edged out, but right now that card makes it in the first round of most of the decks I build, and then I see from there.
Yeah, I've got
Um,
it in there too. I think it's probably a like 11th gambit right now,
sure.
but I definitely included it because having an extra distraction esque effect is not a bad thing.
Right alongside that, mostly because I think it's quite cunning is mirror move for me.
Okay.
Because uh, because of the flexibility, you can push a friendly or push an enemy. You are waiting on your opponent to push somebody, and I
Yeah.
think it may end up in the same situation of being the 11th. But um, I like the fact that it'll probably help you set up supports at some point. You just have to kind of wait for the opportunity. It just feels thematic to have that sneaky
Yeah.
reaction push. But
Well, and I think there's a lot of warbands right now with inbuilt pushes, right? I mean,
mhm.
you've got like the crab, and you've got uh, stalkers have lots of power cards with pushes, and there's just a
And
lot of
Skitter,
pushing.
yeah,
Yeah, and the ghosts and that are just going to be pushing all the time. So
sure,
there won't be a lack of pushes to trigger that off of.
yeah. Um, while we're still on the idea of things that are kind of leaning into our support situation,
Hmm.
um, I thought, or is it? Well, there's Easy Meat is kind of like Strength of the Swarm Light, which is +1 damage if you're supported. Although you get it for just
Yeah,
a single support, so that's an in faction uh, +1 to the first range 1 or 2 attack in the next activation if the attacker has one or more supporting fighters. And we do know that they have some damage issues. It
true.
is one of those like +1 damage before you see the dice roll Um, but
Yeah, just a little risky, but I mean, as you said, we kind of need
mhm,
it, so
mhm.
it's worth considering, and we'll see where else we end up before we make
But what I
choices.
really liked was a universal out of the Hero Deep season, which is Unfair Fight. His reaction: play this
Hmm.
during a friendly fighter's attack action after the declare attack action step. If that friendly fighter has one or more supporting fighters, stagger the target, and the attacker has grievous until it's been resolved.
Yes,
So
I also have this one in there, and it is pretty juicy. Stagger is something that when I first read it, I was just like, yeah, that's kind of cool. I mean, you can kind of set up some additional stuff going forward. And it's like, no, you're potentially putting a fighter into a situation where you get rerolls on them for the rest of the round after you make
yeah,
this attack. Like
yeah,
that's really
right,
good.
yeah,
Um, and then they also get grievous, so a chance for some extra damage just tagged on. Like I don't
yeah.
if this card just gave them stagger, I think that would be good enough. But the Grievous is a nice touch.
Yeah, and then the stagger, of course. It'll be interesting to see how many times the removing a guard token comes into play here. But if your target does have a guard token, this is a potentially pretty huge accuracy boost
Oh man, yeah,
because you're getting a reroll and you're removing the guard token. I know whenever I see these, I'm like, yeah, anti guard. You're like, well, only if you're getting it from a token. It's not going to help from Glisset. Now, but there are some universals out there that are handing out guard tokens. So especially in the, I think Order really kind of leaned into guard with some of their
yeah.
stuff.
It
So
looks like that's sort of what they want Order
mhm,
to be doing. So we'll probably see more of that too going
yeah,
forward.
yeah.
Um,
So those felt like they leaned into that. You got anything else?
yeah, I think Grot Pile is an interesting
Mm,
one for the
mm-hmm,
supports strategy. So
mm-hmm.
this is a in faction one for pushing one friendly minion up to 3 hexes. So this is either of your two little dangle bros. And after this push, the fighter must be adjacent to one or more enemy fighters. Then you can push another friendly minion up to 3 hexes. After this push, that fighter must be adjacent to one or more enemy fighters adjacent to the first fighter.
Yeah,
I mean, if you're trying to set up a big swing with lots of supports, this will get you that. And I think there's just a lot of really strong positioning moves with this because how many cards push for 3 just to begin
right,
with, and
right.
then push 2 of your fighters for 3.
Yeah. I think you include if you include this, then I think you want to make sure you're throwing some weapons in so that
Yeah,
if you
take
have to, you
advantage
can
of that.
really, yeah, exactly. Which also plays off of the crook grin. I think making sure they remain a threat. So we'll keep that in mind. Um, and as we cast the net wide initially, I think I thought about punching up briefly, and then
Yeah,
I cut it because it's got to basically it's got to be your minions, and it has to be a range 1 or 2, which means that there's only one guy who has a on card attack that can actually
mm,
use it. And that's a little too restrictive.
that
So
is a good point. I had it
yeah,
on my list for consideration, and I had not considered that the only fighter who can use it is
kick it.
Gricket.
Yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, I think you're right. You cut that unless you really want to go heavy into weapons, and I don't think
I
that
don't think
that's
building your deck around your minions is
no. I don't think you're going to get very far doing that. So yes, I think we just take out punching up.
hmm,
As strong of a card as it is, it's just
hmm,
not probably going to get you where you need to go.
yeah. Uh,
Um. Yeah. What else?
I thought there's 2 cards that lean on our Kunnin Warfare, which is wanting us to be in cover hexes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one of those is Shadow Lure, and
Right.
you get to push a fighter 1 hex towards the nearest cover hex, or pick the nearest feature token in an empty hex and move that token 1 hex towards that fighter. So there's some kind of positioning stuff to make sure you end up in cover. That it kind of serves as a push, but also has some like defensive. It's a not I don't know, like think of it as a side step that maybe gives you like a little more flexibility for um, defensive stuff. I'm not sure it's enough on its own.
Yeah, I
But
think.
then, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I considered it. I hadn't initially included it, but I think I wasn't really thinking about the needing to stand and objective stuff so much.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, we do definitely need ways to just force that, and this is a way to do it.
Yeah, and we may end up with enough other pushes or better pushes to do the trick. I think this almost certainly gets cut, but
Right.
I did take note. I thought Merc Lurkers, though, Merc Lurkers.
Yeah.
I thought Merc Lurkers was an option. This is give a guard token to each friendly fighter in a cover hex. After having played some, you kind of spend a lot of time in cover hexes.
Okay.
Um, that and then you think about again those minions or Crookgrin who are two dodge. If they're two dodge in a cover hex on guard,
It's pretty
that's a
juicy.
lot, right? And this could hit more than one fighter at a time. So
Yeah.
I don't. It doesn't feed directly into strategies other than that Kunnin Warfare one where you can get yourself on guard, and so you can't get like driven back out of them / killed out of them. So
Hmm. Yeah.
something there.
So I had also considered, although now that looking at the list more, I'm thinking they probably come out. Uh, First was Swarming Strike. I just don't know that we actually need that extra accuracy boost. You just make the first friendly fighter making attack action to count as having one additional supporting fighter.
Yeah, it's
Um,
it's tough, right? Like it's
yeah,
real tempting because it gives you the chance to do some of this stuff. Like it gives you a chance to. We've got those two surges that need two supporting fighters. If
right.
you're going in and Tough Skull's the only supporter, which he's going to support a lot. This lets you trigger those, and it lets you do some more of your supporting tricks later in the game where you've taken some casualties and you may not be as easy to pull those supports. It's really tempting.
Yeah, I. But I don't know. I feel like maybe given their innate accuracy, that we probably just need to go with pushes in here for the most part.
Mm.
Um, and then, sort of in that vein, I had considered Swarming Advance,
Hmm.
just because it can push two fighters. But the restriction being that they have to be towards a friendly fighter who's in enemy territory.
Hmm.
So if you draw this in round one, it's almost dead, just because their base move 3. Um, it's not guaranteed dead, but like it doesn't feel great. Um, it's definitely a later choice that I picked up. I don't know that it really helps you a lot, but it does let you move multiple fighters, which is always a
Hmm.
plus.
Hmm. Uh, I got two cards that are uh, not they don't feed well. I'll take this back. So I've got two cards, one of which does kind of feed into one of our objectives, and that would be Swamp Spill. We talked
Yep,
about um,
get the reroll.
more rerolls helps you make sure that you've got the all success roll.
Mm-hmm.
It helps with people who are fishing for the grievous damage. This is choose one friendly fighter. You can reroll one dice in that fighter's attack rolls for range 1 and range 2 attack actions and persist until the end of the phase. Rerolls for the entire round, especially when you've got people with longer range, that's pretty good.
It is pretty good. I also had it on my list. I like accuracy is not necessarily the thing this warband needs, but like as you say, there's a number of things where we kind of need to be able to make sure we're gonna roll like the dice that we need.
Yeah.
And so I thought it also made sense to include.
And then one, and I think this might be however you build these guys. I think this might be an auto include. Is Skin of Their Teeth.
Yep. Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it just
Reaction play during an attack action. If it's doing the exact amount of damage to take you out, then you take 1 damage off that attack action to a minimum of 1.
yeah. I mean, I don't know how many times I've gotten burned by the reduced damage by 1 ploy that the wolves have.
Yeah.
Um,
uh, Narrow escape.
yeah, and this
Yeah.
basically feels the same.
Yeah.
And we know that card is good, so
Hmm.
this card has to also probably be good. And maybe in reality, when you start playing these guys, you find out that it doesn't come up enough because they don't all have 4 wounds. But my guess
I
is that,
mean, yeah, I think it does come up because
yeah,
I think your little guys, even somebody's like, well, I got a 2 damage attack. Let me farm a little glory off of one of these
yeah, and then
minions, and you're like, just kidding. I'm only taking one, and now you're gonna get punched back. It's
yeah,
great.
yeah. I think it's a really strong card. I think it goes in.
Yeah. Quick sidebar for you. A lot of these things say, reduce, take one less damage or something. The wording on this is,
Reduces the damage characteristic.
yeah, -1 damage from that attack action, and damage is capitalized, so it's reducing the damage characteristic. So you mess with surge of aggression here if somebody's coming in for a 4 damage
That is very
thing.
true. That's it's very strange. I wonder why they worded it that way.
I'm not sure, but the circumstances where that would happen. I mean, they probably. I would prefer that they were generally worded this way. I think because
Hmm.
you end up having the question like I think I was helping people out with that question this last Thursday where I was like, yeah, you did one less damage, but it was still a 4 damage attack. It
Right.
wasn't this card; it was something else. And I was like, I know that doesn't really sound like it makes sense, but that's how the
Uh,
wording is.
yeah, that's
This won't come up too often because it's going to have to be. It'd have to be a 4 damage attack, which is also dealing the exact amount of damage. So they'd have to be taken out like Tough Skull or Manok who's taking 1 damage already, and then they're coming in doing 4 or whatever.
yeah,
Anyway, so the circumstances where it actually messes with surge of aggression are relatively few. But
for sure.
I think that hits everything. Obviously, you always throw Duel of Wits in there, and
Oh yeah, I
Outrun Death
mean,
are always in
card
consideration.
draw stuff is always
Yeah.
something to think about. The only other one that I had that was another in faction card is Creeping Doubt.
Mm.
I think
Mm.
it's a little hard to engineer, but you choose an enemy fighter and you push one friendly fighter a hex closer to the chosen fighter. Then, if that friendly fighter is adjacent to the chosen fighter, so just to clarify, the first piece does not require you to end up adjacent. But if you do end up adjacent, you then get to stagger that fighter.
Mm.
So you get sort of the double whammy here. You get a push. It's basically a sidestep, but it's restricted a little bit. And then if you can engineer it right, you get to stagger, which gives you rerolls for ostensibly the rest of the round,
Okay.
unless they want to go on guard. So it gives us another way to reroll dice if you have that particular setup where you're 1 hex away. I don't know that it's like good enough to make the cut, but I think it's worthy of consideration.
Yeah. Give me the bad news. How many gambits are we on now?
Well, if we throw in things like Duel of Wits, we are above 15. If
Okay.
we don't throw those in, we're at 15. So,
Okay. All right. We'll pause on that. We'll go to upgrades, or do you have
yeah,
anything else you want
no,
to
I think
sort out
I
there?
think upgrades is definitely good to continue on to because I think that might help to thin out some of the stuff in the power cards for
Okay.
ploys. Um,
So I can say one of the first things I always do when I'm making an aggro deck is I throw in augmented limbs, and I threw it in and immediately took it back out because
yeah, how
I
many
was like,
range one attacks you're gonna use?
yeah, there's just not that many. And so
Uh,
then I went looking for uh, strength of terror,
yeah,
which doesn't
which
exist
is
anymore.
gone.
So
So
yeah,
no,
whoopsie.
no, just +1 dice, which is a little sad.
Yeah.
But one that kind of gets us close there is Master of Merc. So this is a
Hmm.
in-faction card that they have where you have +1 dice. This fighter's attack actions, no range restriction, while this fighter is in a cover hex. This fighter's attack actions have ensnare while the target is in a cover hex.
Yeah. I had those situations happen several times, and it'll happen. And I was using Godsworn, who had relatively low range stuff. I think with your range 2 and 3 guys, you're gonna fulfill both categories a few times. So
Yeah,
uh, the +1 dice being the more important one, but I think that's a solid choice, and I think getting extra dice is pretty difficult. So I think
Hmm.
even with the positioning restrictions, I think it's a go-to.
Yeah, and I mean, +1 dice on top of all the support stuff is going to mean lots of really accurate attacks.
Hmm.
And +1 dice with no range restriction is just kind of silly. Like,
Hmm.
there's a lot of things you could do to mess around with this and get some crazy stuff going. But I think just as a base accuracy booster, it's really strong.
Hmm. I think you probably pick up great strength here.
Yep, definitely.
It's not an exciting choice, but it is. With the damage increases out there, these guys can't really reach for the range 1 or 2 ones, or the
Correct.
range 1 ones. So feral symbiote and such are not good choices for them.
Yeah.
So uh, they're a little
Yeah.
more limited on that.
So I had initially leaned away from Savage Strength as well, just
Yeah,
because they do have a number of 2 dodge fighters. But
yeah.
thinking about it more, they kind of needed the damage boosts, and both Tough Skull and Manok do not go to 2 defense dice. So maybe that's an okay pickup.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's all right to include in there, and we'll see. I think we've identified damage as a potential problem for him. So
Hmm.
um, we also mentioned including some weapons with these guys
Yeah.
to increase that, particularly for your minions who are going to be they're going to be getting up close, and I think you want something on one of those guys just to have that um, have them be a threat if you need. Uh, for me, there's a bunch of weapons out there. There's the interesting thing of like putting ranged weapons down increases your chance of uh, scoring the outmaneuver
Hmm.
objective. That's
Yeah.
only a one glory objective, so not too big deal. So I did a quick look through like some of the bows and that sort of thing, but I just kept coming back to Soul Tooth Dagger,
Yep.
um, a an attack that has 3 dice on Fury is going to benefit a lot from supports. Um, it'll crit up to 3 damage. It could have a reroll if the target's got to move. I think there's a lot to recommend it there. So
Yeah.
I thought that was a pretty
It sees a lot of play right now
sure.
because it is really good.
Yep.
I don't see any reason not to use it. It's a solid upgrade for all of your fighters except for probably Mana. Like, you could
Mm,
even put it on Torka Tough Skull because he starts with just 2 Fury, which is just
that's
not
true.
that accurate. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think it's a solid include. I've got it on my list.
The only other one I was looking at is I think Wicked Lash might actually be an option here.
Yeah.
Um, it's a lot easier to engineer supports if you're range 2. We've already got a fair amount of range 2 though, so this would be something that you would be putting on the little guys. Basically, there's some circumstances where it would be good for Manic or Tough Skull, where if they were damaged and the target was damaged or something like that. But
Yeah.
so
I was thinking the same thing, and I just kept feeling like you're going to end up in situations where you couldn't get the damage counter on them because of their 2 wounds. But I guess even if they don't get that, you can still push it to 3 Fury, 2 damage just for your opponent being wounded, and that's still pretty solid.
mm. What else do I like? I liked either Duelist Speed or Soundless Step. Probably Soundless Step. Um,
Yes.
I like that for a couple reasons. Having that, we call it surfing or whatever. We have several decent range 2 fighters between your big guys, uh, which they can really take advantage of this kind of card a lot. So
Yep.
they can attack, take a step, attack, take a step, and that step can be a step back out of if the opponent has range 2, you can step back away from them. It can be step onto a gloom, so you got a little more protection. It can be step so that your next attack has a target. You kind of work your way through people. I think there's a lot to recommend it, both because of the inherent talents of this warband and because of some of the objectives that we're working with. You can make an attack and then step over to be able to support somebody else on the next attack. So
Yeah.
um, I mean I can keep going. Manic can attack step so that he's next to somebody, so that on your next turn you'll be able to trigger his cunning command, or whatever it is, cunning command, his reaction, because he's got to be able
Yeah.
to be near somebody for that. So um, I
If
think at the very least you're taking soundless step. You may take duelist speed.
yeah, if you didn't know, getting to push a hex with a 2 reach fighter every single time they make an attack or do anything is
Yeah.
really good. So give that a try. It's pretty fun. I
Hmm.
have some scarring memories from early days of Mollog with some quickening, or not what
Duelist speed.
duelist speed probably at that time.
Yeah.
Um, just bopping people and then moving in to bop somebody else.
Yeah.
It's not great, but it is very
I
good.
I would do the one where he what was it, escape artist? There were a couple where if he's attacked, he gets to push instead of being driven back.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like every activation, he's just taking a step somewhere.
Yeah, so it's like, oh, I attack
Yeah.
him. Well, then he gets to move into position to hit another little guy, and then he smacks him, and then moves into. And it's like, oh my god, covers the whole board in one round and gets to bop whoever he wants. It's pretty
Yeah.
good. In that
Oh.
same vein, I was thinking Quickening Greaves. The timing
Mm,
is a little different, but getting an extra push before the start of the round or at the end of the round can be pretty good.
I see, to set up supports or some such.
Setting up supports, stepping into gloom, moving to be adjacent to an enemy fighter. Um, I think there's a lot of uses for it. And we've got a lot of these maneuvering type scoring cards right now. And
Hmm.
so I think having more ways to engineer those sort of unexpectedly can be
Mm,
a good thing. Um, so I don't know if it stays in, but I think it's worth considering.
sure. Yeah. Um, I was looking at, it's usually a good idea to have a +1 wound in there, something for if you get a fighter that's
Yep.
so. Looking at both Great of Fortitude and Scavenged Armor.
Yep.
Scav- Scavenged Armor is pretty attractive. I think you're going to end up in enemy territory a fair amount.
Yeah, I
It's
think
hard to
so too.
say. And going on guard with some of those two dodge guys can make them really unattractive for a kill. So um, I think I might start with scavenged armor, and then if I found like no, I'm just not going aggressive enough, then I would trade down to great fortitude.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the only yeah, you maybe even go with both, but
Mm,
I think
sure.
you're right. You probably start with scavenged armor, assuming you're being as aggressive as we think, and
Hmm.
then maybe adjust as you've played a little bit.
Hmm.
In that same sort of vein of like old school staples, what do you think of Glory Seeker?
Yeah, I think that's good. I think especially if you, I would also think of the Mork Crow. Um,
Yep,
it's a
that's
range
worthy of
4 3
consideration.
Fury Grievous that you put on, and now we're making Far Strider, right?
Literally,
uh,
yeah.
lobbing shots from far away in the safety of your own Gloom Hex. I think Glory Seeker is a solid choice, and we've only. I might do something like Great Strength and Glory Seeker rather than Great Strength Savage Strength, or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it lets you. I mean, uh, what's I can't remember. Shank is kind of a jerk if he's got a net that's doing up to 2 damage from wherever
Yeah.
he's at. So,
Yeah, I mean that's pretty solid. So
yeah,
that was the one I had in there right off the bat for the extra damage, along with great strength. So I think we
sure.
can consider that. Another damage booster that I initially thought about, but have realized needs to be cut, is Spiteful Strength. This is only on range one attacks. So
Mm.
again, that does not qualify, and that's in the in faction cards.
Well,
Which
it's the infection. It's only on minions.
oh, and it's only on minions. So there's literally one fighter who can use it.
Before
Uh,
you upgrade. Yeah.
yeah, if you don't give him any sort of weapons, that's
Yeah.
yeah, it's just bad. There's like I was just kind of grabbing everything that gave bonus damage, and that is not a good
Sure.
choice.
Yeah.
Um, and then another one that kind of gives damage is Dirty Fighter. I initially was like, oh, this could be kind of cool, and then I read it closer, and I'm like, no, this is not going to be that good.
This
Um,
is if you're supporting somebody and they miss, then you can react to do a damage.
yeah. So
Yeah.
so this is you have to put it on the fighter who's going to be supporting, and then when a friendly fighter's attack fails that the upgraded fighter was supporting, they
Mm-hmm.
deal 1 damage to the target. Um, I guess the only maybe like better use case here is that you could put this onto Tough
Tough
Skull,
skull.
and
Yeah.
then he can be triggering a reaction for 1 damage on any
Sure.
miss from 2 away.
I
Um,
I think if we were going with like the cruel tricks direction,
yeah,
and we're gonna make up for our damage with ping instead,
but you do,
then I
yeah,
think we go with this. I think it might be a little too situational for what we got here.
I agree. So we'll cut that.
Yeah.
Um, let's see other things. So
Uh,
I just threw in Silent Helm and Silent Ring because they tend to be pretty solid, but I don't actually know that we care to run either of them, given the aggro nature of these guys, and they're probably not trying to be super survivable, but
yeah.
maybe.
If I'd gone silent sword on the weapon, then maybe I'm going with those, and then we've got more help for everything to prove.
Hmm.
But I think maybe lean away from that.
Yep,
Um,
I agree.
there there are two illusion ones that I thought were pretty interesting.
Mm,
Titan of Cruelty and Titan of Cunning.
right.
Um, so Titan of Cruelty, and these are illusions, so they are free to place. They're upgrades that are free to put on. They will go away if the fighter is dealt damage, chosen by a gambit, or at the end of the action phase. The Titan of Cruelty is basically you can think of it as soundless step, but illusion version, and he can't do it after scything. So
Yep.
after their action, unless it was a scything attack action, you can push the fighter 1 hex. So um, I think maybe you don't include both that and soundless step. I think you pick one or the other.
Yeah.
And it might. I think it's a thing that you kind of want a little more long term. So
I
maybe
would
not.
agree. And
I thought. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, just in general, like, and maybe, obviously, I haven't played any games yet with them, and maybe you saw some of this this last league night. It just feels like illusions are just gonna kind of gum up the works a little bit. It's like, oh yeah, I've got this upgraded fighter, and I want to push them a hex, and then it's like, oh, but if I do that, I break the illusion, and like, oh, my
If you take
opponent.
a damage or
Well, if you choose them with
oh,
a
choose
gambit,
yeah. I was thinking of this most recent one where like, well, no,
yeah.
it's exactly what it does. It pushes the heck. Oh yeah, right.
And so then it's like, well, if you want to do any other pushes or whatever, and you have to choose them, then it's like, oh,
Hmm.
well, now I can't do that if I want to keep my upgrade. And
Hmm.
um, I don't know. I guess I'm leery of illusions for that reason, but I can see the like appeal early in the game where you're like, I just get to throw this out for free and then get a really nice bonus. So
Hmm. Um, the other two that I was looking at are defensive. There's Titan of Cunning is in faction, and it's just a straight +1 defense.
yeah, I mean,
So
it's good.
without needing glory, you can bump Manic up to 2 block or something like that, which is pretty tasty.
Yeah.
Um, and the other one is a oh no, this is in faction as well. Intimidating Phosphor, and that is -1 dice from enemy fighters' attack actions
Oh,
while they target this fighter. So no range restriction on that.
how did I? Oh,
Um,
it's also an illusion.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's also good. I mean, there's been a lot of times where I've played into the -1 dice thing that's on a ploy that the Reapers have, and just felt like, man, this is awful. So I have to go after the big guy or take -1 dice. Like, this feels garbage. Um,
Yeah.
and so just -1 dice just until you get rid of this thing. That's also quite strong. Um, so yeah, I can definitely see why you'd maybe throw that in. Um, yeah,
How many upgrades are we sitting on now?
that is 14.
Okay.
But I could take out Savage Strength, and that would drop us back down to 13. I think we
Okay.
had already discussed that we could just do that because we have Glory Seeker. So we'll,
Sure.
we'll say we got 13 there.
All right. So these are the ones that I feel like are leaning the least on some of our other stuff. So list me off what our upgrades are, and we'll see if we can make some cuts and then work our way
Oh,
backwards.
and then actually one
Oh,
other one that I had forgotten to mention is that we
okay.
could include Savage Visage.
Mm.
It'd be,
Mm.
I think, our
Range one.
first. Oh, is it range? Oh, range one. Never mind. Get it out of here.
Yep.
Get out of here, Savage
Be gone.
Visage. You're great, except in this warband. Okay. So then, yeah. So then we actually only have 12, and the options are Scavenged Armor, Soul Tooth Dagger, Soundless Step, Wicked Lash, Glory Seeker, Great Fortitude, Great Strength, Quickening Greaves, Intimidating Phosphor, Master of Murk, Mork Crow, and Titan of Cunnin.
Okay. I think my off the bat, I would say let's drop Wicked Lash.
Okay.
Um, and then if you're playing this, think about like, hey, I drew Soul Tooth Dagger. What if this had been Wicked Lash? Would I feel better about that?
Yeah.
I think maybe again, Wicked Lash actually comes back if you're doing your ping build. Wicked Lash looks a little more
Actually,
tasty.
yeah. Very true. If you got the pink
Um,
stuff.
and then maybe just Titan of Cunnin or Phosphor um, as a
Yeah.
defensive -1. Do you see anything else that would jump at you as a cut?
No, I don't think so. I think it's probably one of the ones in the illusions, just because I think they're strong, but I don't know that we necessarily want both. I think more often than not, -1 dice is probably going to be better than +1 defense. Maybe. I guess it depends. I mean, there's a lot of situations these days where people are just stacking rerolls and dice. And so -1 dice maybe doesn't actually help you that much because it's like, oh, they went from 4 but dice with 3 rerolls back down to 3 dice with 3 rerolls. Like,
Yeah.
okay, my chances of rolling a crit on 1 dice were still 1 out of 6. So,
Yeah.
Titan
If
it.
you're standing in gloom, then extra dice help a little bit as
More
well.
as well. Yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
thinking Titan probably gets us there.
Okay. Let's give that a shot.
Yeah. And that kind of blends nicely with like putting Manok back in a gloom with the Mork Crow and Glory Seeker, and then just being like, well, okay, I will pretend to be a Farstrider today, and we'll go nuts and see how many people get annoyed by getting pinged for 3 damage when I roll crits. There'll be a lot of people because I remember that being super annoying. All right, so with those, we have a lot of movement tech from Soundless Step and Quickening Greaves, and then we've got some damage boosters, which helps. So we probably don't have to have quite as many damage boosters if we don't want to in the ploys.
Yeah. Is this a time to look? Should we do gambits? Yeah, let's do gambits now,
Yeah,
and then we'll
let's
look
get
back at the
gambits figured
objectives.
out, and then
All
we
right.
can figure out what makes sense in the objectives. So we got Hypnotic Buzz, which I think we had kind of already discussed about cutting.
Yeah, let's do it.
Strength of Swarm, which I think is a solid include. Swarming Advance, which I think we had also talked about cutting. So let's just take that right away. Swarming Strike, Center of Attention, Counter Charge, Mirror Move, Creeping Doubt, Easy Meat, Grot Pile, Merc Lurkers, Skin of Their Teeth, Swamp Spill, Shadow Lure, and Unfair Fight.
All right, let's cut Shadow Lure. I think that was a little too situational.
Okay.
And we're kind of doing the job with some of our other pushes. I think you talked about, so Easy Meat is maybe the one to cut from.
Gives +1 damage if they have a supporting fighter. And we do have multiple sources of +1 damage and upgrades. So I think that one could come out.
Okay.
But I think it's a gut feel. So take that one out. So that leaves us with
What's
11.
our count at? Oh, so we just need one more?
One more. I'm thinking it's either Swarming Strike or Creeping Doubt, probably.
I think Swarming Strike is too good to cut.
Yeah.
I think extra dice, extra damage in this warband is too tasty.
Swarming Strike is your next attack action counts as having one additional supporting fighter. Strength of the Swarm, I think we definitely can.
Yeah. How much pushes do we have if we cut mirror move?
So we've got center of attention, counter charge, creeping doubt, grot pile.
Okay.
So 4.
Yeah, I think maybe mirror move. I might try that. I kind of want to keep swarming strike and then try it out and see like, hey, this is just totally unnecessary.
Sure.
Or
Okay.
yeah.
And that makes sense. And that gives us both extra ways to score if we
Hmm.
just don't have the positioning with the minions or if they're dead,
Hmm.
and just as an accuracy boost, just
Hmm.
flat. So never a bad thing. So then we come back to our objectives. So let's start with, what do you want to start with? Surges or upward or end phase? We've got more end phases, but I think they're maybe easier cuts.
Let's do that then.
Okay. So for end phase, we have Demolish the Opposition, Proud Commander, Unafraid, Born Survivors, Kunnin Warfare, Mind of Mork, Outmaneuver, Showy Tactics, and Looming Threat.
Okay. I don't think you keep both Mind of Mork and Proud Commander. I think because both
Yeah.
those are like relying on you scoring other things, I think that's a little too cloggy. If you drew them both, you'd be in trouble.
Yeah. And I think I
Um,
like Proud Commander better than Mind,
okay.
probably.
Well, then the other thing this does is if you take Proud Commander, then you
You
cut
cut Demolish.
Mind and you cut Demolish.
Yep. And I think that's pretty easy to feel good about. I don't think that
Okay.
there's too much, like, I think you could go either way, but I think the way we're building that feels solid.
Yeah. And where does that leave us for number of end phase?
We just have one end phase left to cut.
Okay. What are you seeing there?
Yeah, so I'm thinking we probably then, it's either Born Survivors or Looming Threat. I think they're the two hardest ones that have a single glory payoff. Unafraid is also
Mm,
fairly difficult, but I think if we cut another 2 glory, we're starting to get pretty low
sure.
on our total glory.
So my vote on that would be I think Looming Threat is more difficult than
I
Born
agree.
Survivors. So
So we cut
let's
that.
chop that.
If you draw Born Survivors in round 1, you just play defensive and you've got like a guaranteed glory. So
Hmm.
I think
And I would flag Unafraid as being our one that is maybe our most potentially problematic objective.
I would agree. I just don't know if we have enough glory to cut it,
Yeah,
unless
yeah.
we can
No,
find another 2 glory end
I
phase
don't think we
somewhere.
can. I think we keep it. You know, 'cause we haven't talked about some of the other aggro objectives, but a lot of them like get the whole warband. You know, bold deeds or um, clean kills is rough with this warband because your
Very
damage
rough.
output is low. You're going to end up leaving some guys
Yep.
with a little bit of health. I was just experiencing that with the Godsworn because I lost a lot of my heavy hitters, and
Yeah.
I had the rest of the round with just like a couple 1 damage guys, and they weren't even making attacks. It's like I don't want to accidentally hit somebody with Olive's uninspired bow and then screw this up. So,
Yeah. Right.
yeah.
So I think, I don't know. My experience has definitely been that one's very difficult sometimes. So,
Yeah. All right.
okay. So that gets us to 6.
Mhm.
We got 2 surges to cut, and our total glory is at 17. So after cuts, we will be down to 15 glory.
15. Little light.
Little light, but I think we can manage it.
Okay.
But yeah, so then for surges, we got everything to prove, which I think we probably keep that.
Mm.
Impending Doom, Orchestrated Kill, uh, Gristle for the Mill, Supreme Cunnin, The More the Meaner, Contest of Equals, and Unequal Contest.
Maybe contest of equals goes. That was a little bit
It was a little
questionable.
iffy anyway. Yeah.
I might even chop. I would either go down to just one of the have 2 supports, but since we kept swarming strike, maybe we don't because that feels like a way to score that pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe everything would prove because we're down to we didn't take any real quarry upgrades, did we?
We didn't take any quarry upgrades at all. And it's our only primacy thing. So if we cut it, and our opponent
Oh.
doesn't bring primacy, then there's just no primacy in the game,
Okay.
which is actually an interesting situation to be in.
Let's give that a shot, and then you pay attention to how often you get one shot, or how often you would be giving up
Yeah.
primacy. So, I think if you're counting on like I need to get one of the little guys one shot, and you're going to be maybe screwing that up for them with your skin of their teeth. Yeah. So I think that, oh gosh, it's hard to believe I'm saying that, but I think maybe everything to prove is the cut.
Yeah. It feels a little weird, but I think it's worth trying.
All
So
right.
that leaves us with our final build.
Okay.
So
we'll include a link to this.
yep.
Oh, you know what we totally overlooked? This is on me. We were inspired to do this because Matt from Set the Tempo has an awesome article, which honestly we should have put in the community shout outs, but you guys know we shout Set the Tempo out all the time. So, but we did a Xandar's Truthseekers build, kind of went through the same process, only in blog format. And I suggested to him that we have a Content Kreator Deathmatch where you and I would live build a Kunnin Crew and play it against his Xandar's Truthseekers. We'll try and get a webcam game going. If that doesn't quite line up, then I'll pilot one and you pilot the other, and we'll somebody will champion for him.
Yeah.
And we'll come back with our feedback on how that matchup goes. So if that's enough for a full episode, we'll do that. If it's not, then we'll append it onto something else. So we'll have a link to his deck in his article, and we'll have a link to this deck, which Phil is saving right now so we don't lose it.
I've got it saved. It is ready to be linked up, and hopefully we will not lose anything in post. All right. Any final thoughts on these guys before we wrap things up here?
No, other than that, the process this time was very different, because last time we were like, hey, we're going to do combo. And that was driving it. Here it was driven by, what do we have? You know, like this is a little more open. And because it's a warband that we have not had much experience with, unlike both of us had seen Spike Claw enough times that we kind of knew what was up with them. There's a little more sort of discovery with this one. So, and I think that's evidenced by the fact that it took us longer. So
it did. It was a decent bit longer. It had a lot more cards to sort of talk through. So
sure,
some good thoughts. We'll definitely have. I'm excited to see how it works. I think these guys have some cool tricks
for sure. Some cool tricks.
Yeah, all those K words. So that'll do it for us today. If you would like to let us know what you think about our deck, if you've got some cool builds that you've tried or other card ideas that you think would be sweet, you can get in touch with us at WTHcast on Twitter or whatthehexcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to go back and check out that Rats episode we were talking about, where we did this the first time around, or if there's any other content for just Age of Sigmar in general that you'd like to go and check out, you can head on over to themortalrealms.com for our general podcast group and check out all the different podcasts that we have, including a new one that just dropped fairly recently, where they go through some of the new story-driven play styles for Age of Sigmar. And it's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
So then I don't know what we've got coming up next. We'll probably be coming at you with, like we said, either something appended with the game of our matchup there between Xandar's and Kunnin Crew, or we'll have something else that just pops up, and we'll figure that out as we go. Davey, you got any recommended listening for folks today?
I do. I took this opportunity. There's a musician I've been meaning to check out for quite a while called King Krule. Krule actually spelled like Cruel Boys Krule. It was pretty exciting. I was like, oh, okay, I gotta do this.
Here you go.
And I found a cool track by him called Borderline. There's a lot of people who like a lot of his stuff quite a bit, but I enjoyed that one. So King Krule, Borderline.
Very nice. I'll have to go check that out.
Sure.
Well, then for What the Hex, I've been Phil.
I've been Davey.
Oh, that's a smart
Yeah,
choice.
yeah. Lessons do get learned sometimes on this cast. Um, but